Okay, so we are going to do a little bit of a run through on Kerbal Space Program 2. Game just dropped today, February 24th, about 6.5 hours ago. So we're going to start a new campaign. We're going to go single player, and you'll see I've already got one going here, but we're going to start a brand new one. We're going to leave the difficulty of normal. We're going to call this test run. Leave it as Kerbal Space Agency and leave the flag. We don't care. I've noticed that when you turn on the first time user experience, there's some really weird stuff that happens. And we simply do not want that to happen, right? There's just certain things we don't want to have happen. So you'll notice I'm trying to mess around with my volume here. It's a little bit loud. So we're going to turn that off. We don't want Paige bugging us every time. I mean, most people who are playing Kerbal Space Program 2, you know right off the bat most of the stuff that's going to happen. So we'll start the campaign. And I'm going to alter my volume settings here. So I apologize. We want to set 20. There we go. Okay. We're still going to check our settings because there's some really weird stuff that happens in here. We want to be able to revert, quick load, include the stock vessels, all the normal stuff. I generally, when I'm testing, I go infinite electricity. I hate running out of power. It just bothers me. I'm going to turn on frames per second because it happens to be a big issue for a lot of people. You want to be able to, see the frames per second. I've been told both ways that you have to restart in order to see them anyway. I don't know if that'll happen here. We're not going to touch anything else. Everything else we're just going to leave exactly the way it is, right? So apply, and then close this. Okay, so let's resume the game. Let's go into the VAB. What we're going to do is we're going to just create a very simple, static baby rocket that we can get into orbit, EVA with our Kerbal, and get back onto the ground safely. We're not going to go to the Mun, we're not going to go to Minmus, we're not going to, do any of that stuff. We just want to put someone in orbit, okay? So, we're just going to take the tin can. Now, moving around in the VAB is a little weird. The normal, it used to be you could hit left and right arrow and up and down and it would move, and it doesn't do that anymore. It's all mouse controlled. So to go up and down, you're holding in the mouse wheel. And to spin on the axis left or right, it's the right mouse button. And hold it in. One other thing that I've noticed is that I have a tendency myself, I want to orient my craft so that when I pitch and hit S, in flight, I end up going out over the water. So I have to rotate this puppy with E once. Right? And I know that if I'm looking at the 03, this window is facing the water. Trial and error this morning. Okay, so we're going to put a couple parachutes on this thing. We're going to put a Mark 16 on top, and we are going to throw a couple of radial mount drogues on this thing. Some of the controls are still the same, right? So for symmetry, it's still X, right? To get 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, right? So I want 2 of them, one on either side. They have the re-entry effects for heat turned off in early access, and that's all fine and dandy, but that doesn't stop me from building the way that I normally build. It's just good practice. So I'm going to throw a small heat shield on the bottom here. And then we are going to do some coupling. The TD12, the stack decoupler. Come on, there we go. And now we need to put some fuel tanks and some engines on. I'm going to use just a very basic rocket here. So what I want is, I want this medium X264, the Methalox fuel tank. I want 2 of those, but I need to have an adapter right? Because otherwise, otherwise you end up with the rocket looking like this, and that's not good for aerodynamics. Okay, so we've got those. We need some reaction wheels, which are now under utility. They are no longer under, there isn't a thing over here in the VAB for command and control that we're used to seeing with KSP1. It's utility under parachutes and quality of life. When life support becomes a thing, I'm assuming this is where they're going to put all the you know, habitation pods and snacks for the Kerbals. So stabilizers are down here. We want a medium one. Might be MRW 250. And then what we want is the mainsail engine, the RE M3 mainsail. Now, those of you who are used to the old way of doing things are going to look over here on the right-hand side and be like, where in the heck is my Delta V? Well, you'll see it under the green launch, right? Delta V, 4,100 meters per second, which is more than enough to get into LKO. I think it's 3,600 is what's generally required to get into LKO. We've got 4,100, and that's not a big deal. That should be more than enough. If you want to see it by staging, there's this little blue arrow here, right next to the launch button, right? And it'll bring up all the stages. Right? Look at that, 4,171 meters per second of Delta V. One of the big complaints that people have had this morning is, where's the thrust to weight ratio? If you go under the engineer's report, it will give you the TWR. Unfortunately, at this time, it doesn't do it by stage, as far as I know. I have not seen it by stage. It's only the total, right, thrust to weight. I'm sure when they, you know, when they start adding features into the game, they're going to change some of this stuff. I know a lot of people have complained you can't find thrust to weight, you can't find Delta V. There used to be a thing in KSP1 where we could see what the Delta V was by stage per location. So if I wanted to be like, how much Delta V does my lander have if I'm on the MUN to get back home, right? That's no longer here, not that I've found. So we have a TWR of 2.7, which is more than enough to get off the ground, more than enough to get into orbit. We have 4,171 meters per second of Delta V. That's more than enough to get up into orbit. Okay, we should be just fine. Now, I say that knowing that I have run a simulation here several times this afternoon now, and we have seen all kinds of weird stuff happen. I've seen crafts not get up off the ground. I had one this morning with the thrust TWR of about 7.5, couldn't get off a launch pad. I don't know if it was my machine, if Kerbal Space Program 2 just flaked out at that point. I don't know. Anyway, that's the VAB. We can color this. I mean, we've got the, you know, ugly gray and ugly blue whatever here. We'll change it. We'll give this thing a red accent somewhere in the bright red neighborhood, and we'll apply it to the entire assembly. Look at that. Now we've got some funky red in here. You know what? Let's give it a base color. We're going to give it... I like green. All right, so we'll let's make it yellowish. Ooh, that's ugly. Let's make it light blue. There we go. Still ugly. It'll take me some time to figure this out. There. Okay, let's launch. I will say the graphics for Kerbal Space Program 2 are a vast improvement. Some of the controls, right, it takes a bit to get used to where the stuff is. Like the nav ball used to be dead center of the screen, it's now over on your left. Right, SAS used to be on the left-hand side of the nav ball and was much smaller. Now it's on the right and it's much bigger, so you can see it. Right, your altitude used to be way up here. Now it's here. Okay, your surface velocity used to be on the bottom of the nav ball. Now it's on the side. okay? So there's a lot of stuff that has changed. It's going to take some getting used to. So one thing that I want to do, I want to check the settings, right? There is one accessibility, user interface. There was one setting, skip the launch sequence. If you turn this on, if you have this set to off, I should say, you'll go to launch and nothing will happen. And then it'll start counting down from 10. We don't want that. We want, at least I don't. I just want it, and I hit the button, I want it to go. Okay. So we close that and we resume the game. Now, you can see right here, I'm running between 30 and 40 frames per second, right? Which is pretty good. I have, the performance has been one of the hot button issues, right? In that, you know, people are saying they need to spend $1,200–1,300 on a new graphics card. I've got a 2060 Super. It seems to function just fine. All right, you're also going to notice our delta V changed. From the VAB to the launch pad, we somehow lost 500 meters per second of delta V. I don't know if this is going to be enough to get up in orbit. Probably going to have to revert and add another tank. But let's give it a shot. So, same control to fire off the engine, so let's go. Boom, we are cruising. All right, we're going to start our gravity turn here. Now see, I know I'm aiming east. I generally do some pretty aggressive gravity turns. I'm doing it on my own. I'm not used to, I'm honestly not used to doing this on my own. I'm used to having MacJab do it for me. Right? Because when I do this manually, my gravity turns are pretty darn aggressive. Okay, so we're clipping around. Our AP, our apogee is about 35. We want this to hit about 75. And our periapsis is at 500 or so. So we're going to kill the engine. And I'm going to pause it here for a moment and go into the map. So what we want to do, as always, we want to circularize this. You'll notice the graphics here for looking at the surface of Kerbin. Isn't that much better than it used to be? That is awesome. The devs did listen when people said they wanted graphics, but that's neither here nor there for this test. Okay. You can see here, like if I unpause this, we'll go back here. I'm running between 30 and 50 frames per second. That's more than I could have ever hoped for. Okay, so what we want to do, we want to circularize with no computer, with no MacJab. I can't just, you know, create a maneuver node and be done with it. I have to do it manually. And there are some serious considerations that people are going to have to, you know, think about when they do this. For example, when you're paused, you cannot create a maneuver node. I'm clicking all over the place. I cannot. I can set Kerbin as the target. I could zoom out and I could set MUN as the target, but I cannot create a maneuver node when I'm paused. Another thing you're going to see here, you can right click on, right, if we we'll go like this. See, can't even turn stuff off anymore. So we're going to unpause quickly. Oops. You can still bring up the AP and PE markers, and you know, you can see them. And I right clicked on it when I was paused, and I couldn't get it to go away at that point, which in my opinion is a bug. Something the devs will have to work on. But we're going to unpause this. We're going to set a maneuver node, because what we're going to do is we're going to create a maneuver plan, right? And what we want to do is we want to circularize the best we can. Now, I'm going to pause this again. When you are creating a maneuver node, you used to be able to right-click on these, right, and bring them up, and you could see everything. You could see where your old one and your new one were, and you can see where the old ones are down here in the lower left. But when you're playing now, if I right click there, there's my new PE of 72, and here's my new AP of 113. As soon as I click on this maneuver node, they go away, and I cannot bring them up again. And that is a detriment. In my opinion, that's a bug. They need to fix that. Anyway, we'll pause again. You're going to see, here's your burn timer, right? It no longer tells you the length of the burn in forcing you to, well, half of that is when I start and the other half is when I end. No, now this tells you, and I actually like this. I like this far more than the original. This tells you how much delta V is required, right? Doesn't change, 1,067 meters per second to get this nice orbit. But now it tells you to start your burn in 1.5 minutes. So it's already taken the guesswork out of, well, you have to cut this number in half. No, it just tells you in 1.5 minutes, minute 35 in this case, hit Z and full thrust. And you don't have to worry about how long it takes because it will tell you to stop the burn in X number of minutes and seconds. Or if you're using the old style Nerve engines, you're in the middle of space and you're trying to get from, Joule to Sol, and you've got the thrust limiter down to 1%. It could take hours, but it'll tell you how long to burn for. Another thing that it does is when it's counting down, when you start getting within, under 30 seconds, these little buttons are going to start lighting up on the side here to say, okay, you're getting close, you're getting close, you're getting close, go ahead and burn. Okay. What we also want to do is all the Kerbals, I have Bill here, our lovely engineer, right? And that's something that we're going to have to talk about. So we have our lovely engineer, Bill Kerbin here, who has SAS capabilities. I don't know if that's going to stick around after EA or if it's not, but all Kerbals, I've not seen a single Kerbal that doesn't have SAS control this morning. So it appears to be that we're good to go with any Kerbal at this point. Now, we don't have experience, we don't have leveling up, we don't have any of that other stuff, from career mode that people really want. But, until they take that away, we're just going to use whoever decides to jump into the capsule first. And at this point, it's Bill. So what we're going to do, we're going to set SAS to the maneuver. Right? We don't prograde. Yeah, eventually you'll get there. But we want the maneuver. We want the maneuver node, right? So we'll start this back up. We'll watch the craft spin. And we go here and watch it spin. See, I'm near 60 frames per second at this point. The 2060 Super is more than powerful enough. I mean, it helps that I have a decent processor and 32 gigabytes of RAM as well, but the 2060 Super is just fine. See, I'm over 60 frames per second. Granted, I also have a very small craft. Keep in mind, I'll pause this again in case I digress and miss my window. Keep in mind that craft complexity goes towards performance, right? Don't think that, oh, he's got 66 frames per second with a 2060 Super, it's always going to be that way. No, if I built a ship with 1,000 parts, I would expect this to be around 20, if not less. Okay. Craft complexity equals performance. Okay. Go back here. For some reason, I'm always in map mode when when I'm doing burns. Now, I could fast forward to the maneuver, which no big deal. I do love that it now gives you, like, if you're going to crash into the surface, it tells you, no, don't do it. Stay away from the light. But we got, 30 some seconds here. I'm not going to, I could probably, fast forward a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal. It's not going to be that much longer now. So notice check mark required delta V, right? Start burn. This will light up green at some point. The stop burn will also check mark into green. So Here we go. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and burn. And it tells me 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop the burn. That's actually pretty close. I don't think I could have done that any better unless I was using MechJet. Right, so we'll get rid of the maneuver, put ourselves in a prograde, and we're in orbit. There's a lot of stuff here that is simply just not very different than KSP1. The controls have changed a bit. The layout has changed a bit. There are problems, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of things that have not been very friendly about this. But, you know, we got to deal with it in EA. The developers will fix stuff. So, we wanted to put Bill in orbit and get him out of the capsule and have him float around for a bit. Well, we have a problem. I am getting myself back into where I can view my ship here. I'm using the right mouse button because left and right arrows, again, move you back and forth. However, if you get off center, you can just hit the home key on your keyboard. I found that out today, totally by accident. Now, look at the surface of Kerbin. Ooh, that's lovely. You can actually see the mountains and the clouds and the water. And that's all great, fantastic. We want Bill to come out of the capsule. EVA is disabled due to an obstacle. I have found, now in KSP1, you could put, as long as you didn't obstruct the window, you could get Kerbals out. But for some reason, I don't know if you can really see this, the hatch really isn't obstructed, like just maybe by a little bit of a corner, because the hatch isn't centered anymore. It's off center, which is really odd. So we can't get Bill out. We could revert to the VAB. We could take the parachute off. Right, we could take the drogue chute off. I always use drogue chutes. It's just a habit. We could take the drogue chute off. We could, you know, get him into space and see how everything functions. But, you know, for the time being, we, you know, just want to get him back home now. Bill, we screwed up. We didn't send you up with enough snacks. Let's get you home. So what we want to do, this is no different than any other maneuver with KSP, right? I'm just going to create a maneuver node, and I'm going to prograde this bad boy, or I'm sorry, retrograde this bad boy. See, it's going to wants me to crash, and I don't like that I can't see what the new PE is until I get off of here. 1,916 meters. I want this at about 30. Yeah, 31,000 meters is good, because then what I can do is I can, when I'm coming in, right, I can, excuse me, I can slow myself down as I'm coming through the atmosphere. Now, we also don't have to worry in EA with atmospheric reentry conditions, right? It's just plain and simple, we don't have to worry about it. They'll turn it on at some point, we will. So in my opinion, it's just good practice to, you know, keep doing what you've been doing, right? So let's do this. We're going to spin ourselves to the maneuver node. See, I always miss the camera. Right. One thing I want to show you before we do the burn is the new PE, I'm doing this so we can land in the daytime. I am sick and tired of landing on the dark side of the planet. So we're doing this so we can land in the day and we can see the terrain as we land. Okay? So, let's warp to the maneuver. We don't want to waste the extra 8 minutes right now. Notice your warp is down here, and it's going just fine. Right? And in about 22 seconds, we will do our burn. And it's only 42 delta V, right? So we're gonna talk about something else here. Thrust limiting. Right, here's our... In KSP, I used to be able to see how long the burn would take. I don't like that I can't see how long it's going to take now. And now that we're too close, I don't want to change the thrust, right? So play with that at your own peril, as it were. So here goes. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to use the shift key. There we go. Delete that, and our new PE is 28.7. I want this bad boy in retrograde. And what we're going to do now is we are going to test warping, right? Because I want to come in rather quickly. Go to 50x. And you can still see, just like in the original, when it warps, it doesn't hold SAS. The ship will tilt. So don't think that they fixed everything just yet. There we go. 4x time warp. And it did that automatically. In KSP1, it would, when you entered the atmosphere, it would drop you all the way back down to 0, and you'd have to manually go up to 4x. Right, so it's not... And see here, 40 frames a second. Not a big deal. I'm not concerned with performance. My machine is more than capable of handling this. It's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 parts. I have a 9-part ship. Of course I have great performance. Now, I have to watch. Right? Because there's no atmospheric effects. I'm not going to have any burning up on re-entry. But we can burn off some of our fuel and slow our descent, right? Because we're still at 2,300 meters per second. And slow ourselves down. Oh, we don't have any more fuel left. Okay. Our new PE is now 470,000 meters below sea level. So we can get rid of the engine. See, I am clicking to stage the decoupler. And we are at 1,100. We're at 13,000 meters, and I haven't been able to decouple this yet. I don't know why it says I have fairing on here, because I don't have fairing. We're just going to decouple this manually because it is not decoupling. And then we're going to have to deploy the chutes manually. And thank God. 500 meters to the surface. So there are a bit of an issue this morning. I'm still, it still for some reason didn't, it didn't stage. So there's a few issues there. So here we are. We have successfully landed. We've been into space. We orbited. We can't get Bill out of the capsule. The next question is how do we recover this puppy? It's really odd that there's no, it used to be right up here. However, it is now under the little K thing here, the escape menu, recover your vessel. Confirm recovery. Confirmed. Woohoo! Here's all of your stuff. Launched, landed, recovered. highest altitude, speed, all of the fun stuff. I would assume when we get, you know, experience, we're going to see a bunch of stuff here with science and all that other stuff. I knew you could do it. And then we go to the tracking station and exit the tracking. Oh, look at that. The vehicle's recovered, and here we are. We're still here, right? So what we want to do is go to the KSC. And that brings us to the end of the little video launching a simple rocket. Again, there were several problems that we had in here. Hatch was obstructed with drogue chutes, so we couldn't go EVA. Apparently, we can't put anything on the capsule. Staging did not work to decouple the engine and the fuel tanks from the capsule itself. We had to decouple manually. Staging did not work for firing the parachutes. We had to fire one of them manually. We could have fired the drogues manually as well, would have even helped further slow us down, but we didn't. And after recovering the vehicle, it doesn't automatically bring you back to the KSC. You have to go back to the escape menu and go back into the KSC. All told, I think it was successful. I do not think that Kerbal Space Program 2 is anywhere close to being finished. It's nowhere near ready for prime time. This is early access. There are going to be multiple patches that come out. I would assume in the weeks ahead and then months down the road, right? I'm sure the devs are collecting all the data that they can right now. But you know, it is what it is. It's early access. It's still fun to play. It's still interesting to see where everything is. It's still, in my opinion, a wonderful, wonderful game that is only going to get better with time. If you're out there and you're watching this and you're playing it and you think this is terrible and you don't want to play Kerbal Space Program 2, all I have to say is please, please give it some time. We all knew this was going to happen. We all knew that this was the way it was going to be. Just give it some time. It will get better. With all that said, I'm Scarecrow71. You can find me on the forums. You can find me on Discord. You know, send me a message. You want to talk? Let's talk. You want to eventually at some point do multiplayer together? Let's hook up. Thank you for watching, everybody. I appreciate it.